I am so excited to see you all here because this is our second edition of the Standards and Specifications Forum at Open Source Summit North America. The first time we did it, I think there was like 7 people in the room to talk about standards, and now look at this full room. So I think we're kind of having a little bit of a moment here. Before we get started, I just want to say thanks to the folks who served on our programming committee for the forum this year. So that's Kate Stewart, Seth Newberry, Shane Coughlin, Samin Hussein, Kellyanne Kulane, and a number of kernel maintainers actually too helped with the CFP review this year, so I want to say thank you. This is a little bit of a unique track, I think, to be having at the Open Source Summit. First off, standards and specifications as a topic area is quite broad, and you might be thinking that it feels out of place at Open Source Conference. But if you happen to be in the audience yesterday for Jim's talk, I just want to point out that a lot of the projects he called out on stage actually have a really strong specification or standards component connected to them. So some of the projects specifically are hosted on our JDF project hosting structure, like the C2PA and the content credential specification. The Overture Maps data project is actually also on the JDF. TZAMA, RISC-V, the Alliance for OpenUSD, our newly launched OpenSTX Foundation, and then the agent-to-agent protocol. All of these projects have a specification connection or standardization connection. And so as we see more of our open communities growing into and exploring these spaces, we wanted to provide a place for that community to gather. So I'm going to just briefly touch on like what our goals are with this forum, because I want to make this something that we do together. Well, for one, we want to bring our communities that develop standards and specifications, into a common forum to share best practices. We've had folks from the IETF come present, we've had folks from the W3C come present, and from other organizations, and we just want to make that space so that these different standards developing organizations and consortia can come align on best practices and grow in a way that our open source communities do that too, right? A second thing is, we've got to show how successfully our open source projects can collaborate with standards development organizations. You've probably heard that it's like oil and water. These things don't mix. They sure do. They sure do. And if we can help highlight the winning stories and examples of where those projects are succeeding and driving value for companies, for the world, for end users, that's even better. So you're going to see some case studies on this track as well. And then, of course, we want to help grow our community of open source developers into standard-savvy practitioners and vice versa. So it's really unique to be able to walk in a space with both kind of cultures. There's sort of a different culture for standards and a different culture for open source. And it's been lovely over the past couple of years to see both sides of that equation opening up, expressing interest in learning. How can we, grow together? What can we learn from each other? And that's part of what this forum is meant to do too. So, I invite you to come get involved. It's not a scary space. It used to be, but it's not. Standards are good for business. This is another reason why we want to do this forum. We have run a research project for the last couple of years, doing the State of Open Standards report and inviting organizations to talk to us about what's important to them when it comes to open standards. You maybe saw this slide as well on Jim's keynote yesterday. But standards are a selling point for organizations. When we think about like the business value of our open collaboration, we also need to think about what's the kind of positive flywheel, if you will, of engaging in open technologies. Organizations are using standards to signal that their products, their services, indicate that they're mature, that they meet maybe regulatory or security compliance. Maybe they're interoperable, because their customers, they want innovation, they want innovative products and services, but they don't want an experiment. So a standard is a great way to signal to your customer that you've got that. Another, this is going to click over, oh, nope. Clicked off, is that standards are good for markets. So, most of our respondents also agreed that there's collective benefits, right? There's some positive externalities of participating in standards organizations. The more people who use a standard, the more value it has. And so, again, that creates a positive externality. We had 77% of our organizations that responded saying that standards help their markets mature and grow, that enables competition and innovation, fair competition, but fair guys in the audience, increases market value and reduces barrier to entry. And so again, that's all about just bringing more people to the table and driving more value for everybody. So they see that as a mechanism to enhance those dynamics and just encourage that growth. So ultimately, standardization contributes to a healthy, competitive market that benefits everybody. So my request is that you help us keep the conversation about these benefits going, right? For the forum, again, we want to highlight these stories. My ask is, the thing that keeps me moving is how do we do that? How do we grow this community? So my ask of you is to help share these talks. Raise awareness of the resources that are increasingly available for our open communities that are getting involved. My team at the JDF has done several courses and webinars and things like that. We're really nice. If you email us and ask us a question, we'll get back to you. Share the resources of the people who speak today, because there'll be some great tools that they share too. Help us plug gaps if there's stuff that you want to know more about, if there are things that are missing from your understanding or you think would be a great resource for your community who wants to learn more, let us know. I would love to have you on our program committee if you want to help kind of source great conversations for this community to have going forward. Just raise your hand. And then I'd love to get your help on the research, right? The data help sell the value. So if you are interested in getting involved in the report, we're looking for organizations and people who might be interested in helping us field, helping us figure out what questions we should be asking, and of course, helping us underwrite that research. So with all of that said, my name is Jory, and this talk is the specifications and standards at the Linux Foundation, so we'll just jump right in. Last year at this session, I asked a question, which is how many standards projects does the LF have? And this was like a pop quiz, guess. How many M&Ms are in the jar? Does anybody remember the answer to that? Probably not. 10. That's a good guess. It's 200. But so that's about, 20% of our active projects have a spec component to them. So this year's quiz question is, what was the Linux Foundation's first standard project? Does anybody want to guess what that is, fellow nerds? You don't get to answer. Scott. Okay, I'll tell you. It's the Linux standard base, actually. So this was originally published in 2001. It was designed to help ensure interoperability across the different distributions of Linux. And, it's still around today. It was last updated in 2015, but just kind of saying this out loud, this has been part of our open identity for some time. So the Linux standard base was our first project. So you can share that fun fact at your next dinner party. So what does that portfolio look like today, however? Kind of a little bit bigger. We actually have 6 standards, which are now ISO publicly available standards. They've gone through the international standardization process. We have 36 traditional standards developing consortia. Again, we have around 200 open and active specification development projects in total, around 3,500 contributors from across 500 organizations. Has grown a little bit, and it continues to grow, and hence my strong motivation to provide more resources and tooling to these communities. So it's gotten quite a bit bigger. One of the reasons I think it's getting bigger is that barrier to entry feels a little less scary, because what we're talking about is creating and adopting voluntary consensus standards and specifications. When I first got into this field, the word standard was a scary word to me. I think that's true for a lot of you, or maybe it has been. So thinking about replacing the word standard with the word agreement makes it suddenly a lot less scary. It just kind of takes that fear out of the process. It takes the fear out of participating in that process, because we can think about gradually reaching higher and higher levels of agreement. We have projects at every stage. I realize it's maybe a little bit small here, but we have community standard, like a de facto standard, an industry standard, or a national or international standard. As you kind of move through those levels of agreement, you need potentially more layers of process, more layers of insurance that you have followed due process, that you have all of the IP agreements in place, that everybody's been given a fair chance to review and agree or disagree or provide feedback. And at the end of the day, that's what standardization is about, is making sure that we've moved through those processes effectively, efficiently, and that we've brought everybody along, because we're trying to produce something that everybody's voluntarily participating in. And again, we at the LF have projects that have hit every stage of this. Our modes, that's in advance, why not? There we go. Our standards modes at the LF, we typically have the majority of our projects set up on one of two structures. And the first is the community specification license mode, which is very, very popular among our open source communities, because it looks and feels a lot like participating in an open source project. It is very GitHub tooling or GitLab tooling oriented. It helps them when they want to develop a spec alongside an open source code base. And similarly to open source, one joins this project and becomes a participant in the project through making a contribution to an open source repo. It's simple like that. But at the same time, we want to make sure that those projects follow some ground rules for participating in a standards project, right? Everybody has an option to, for example, exclude or to change their mind or provide feedback. And so there's some minor modifications to a typical open source governance process to account for that. The other mode that we use a lot when we host a standards project is the JDF traditional mode. And this is a hosting structure that we will orient projects to if they are interested in basically setting them up as their own consortia. Maybe they want to have more variability in their licensing framework. There's lots of IP options that they can choose from. They can kind of brand their consortia the way that any other industry consortia might do. And it helps them kind of meet the requirements that they might need to meet if they want to collaborate through an MOU or a liaison agreement with another standards organization. So typically something we would choose for a project that has a lot more dynamic moving parts, or that has a goal of moving to another standards body after they have done their sort of pre-standardization work with us here at the LF. So these are both designed fundamentally to help the projects secure the agreement that they need, but then also to help make it easier for them to follow, again, those due process needs and respect, the contributions and rights of all those participants. So, one question we will get a fair amount is whether my project, should be a standard. Should I develop my spec further? And that's a great question. And sometimes we will get projects with some level of irrational exuberance for pursuing like ISO standardization, in which case I will just ask them why. Why do you want to do that? That is a lot of work. It may not be for you. So that we want to get to the heart of what is your goal? What impact do you want to have? What objective are you trying to achieve by pursuing that? So that vision for the problem that you're attempting to solve, and are you kind of walking into the situation with a fullness of awareness of what that's going to mean for you long term. We have folks in the audience from the SPDX community and from the open chain community. Those are specs that have been ISO standards for some time. There's maintenance required. It's a lot of work. So don't want you to I want you to come into these situations with eyes wide open. But other than that, or beyond that, we want to make sure that, you've prepared your community for the kind of slight shift in thinking that it takes to maintain a spec versus a code base. So we need to ensure, again, that we've got the due process requirements that for documenting, for auditing your decision-making processes, that you've gotten the IPR commitments that you need from those contributors. That also, ideally, we have example implementations that we can point to, documentation, tests, wide review. That's very, very important. And of course, we want to make sure that your spec document is well organized, well written, and includes, the front matter, the glossary that's free of jargon, that it's something that implementers can follow because it's a recipe, right, for meeting the implementation that you're looking to do. So what problems you're trying to solve and, what are your goals? So at the end of the day, it's all about impact. And last year at this session, Dan Appelquist gave a great talk, a very eloquent talk about the importance of wide review and the role of standards in protecting human rights. And I think that's something that's really incredibly important. And I'm so, so, so proud of our standards communities at the LF because they put that stuff front and center. This is just a screenshot of a report that came out over last week, I think it was, from Witness, which did the threats and harms review for the C2PA content credential specification. The question that Dan asked last year was, what world do you want to create? Because standards help us make that world. Our standards become our reality. So if we're able to kind of, put in the work, do the wide review, think thoughtfully about how we're bringing the stakeholders to the table, how we're reaching those levels of agreement, we can have impact like this. And that's a phenomenal thought. So I will leave you with that thought in your head. What legacy do you want your open projects to leave on the world? I think standards create lasting ones, and I would love to help you do it. So with that is like maybe 2 minutes for questions, because then we're going to do a panel. Jeff.
So a standard can be developed by one organization, or it can be a community effort, a collaborative effort. And I'm sure both people would agree that if collaborative or community, it would be more likely to be better accepted. In your experience, the standards that are out there today, you have a rough idea of, say, what proportion are standards that are developed by a single entity versus community or collaboratively developed standards?
So the question is, what proportion of standards in the world today are single vendor, single org produced versus more collaboratively produced? I mean, I couldn't even begin to estimate that. I mean, that'd be impossible. We'll say that, the LF, we highly promote the latter there, that we're all about. I mean, it takes 5 companies coming together to launch a standards project with us, and that's because we want to make sure that this is, even if it's an early idea, fine. Do we have at least 5 people who are interested in exploring that idea and throwing that spaghetti at the wall? It may fail, that's fine, but hopefully not, and hopefully they prove out some great ideas and we grow the coalition of people, and that's the game. We shouldn't be, afraid of, failure on that front. Yes, person in the, sorry, I don't know you, but yeah. Yeah.
Take it to the international org, they provide input and feedback that they want changes.
Yeah. So that's a great question. And the question is, for the recording, how we help the CSL projects navigate maybe moving up a layer, if you will, and then conversely, when they receive feedback from the upper layer, like how they incorporate that. So the CSL license is our most permissive, most open source accessible license. When we finish or finalize a spec that's a CSL spec, it's typically the spec document itself is typically licensed under like CC by 4, and from there, like anybody can take it and say, okay, I want to build on this idea, or this would be great input into a ISO working group on blah blah blah, and it's available. Use it, friends. Like, it's great. If we want to then engage with that group in a more like direct way, because we want to then maybe advocate for our position further within that working group, we need to help, make that set of contributors who care about that point agents in the working group. And so that may mean that they need to join this standards developing organization that's taking it. Maybe they need to join IEEE, or they need to go work through their corporate channels, because those organizations are very member-based. And the project itself cannot sign, to the IP terms of the ITU, for example. So it is tricky. We do have like pathways around it, but it's doable. It's just, thanks, creative thinking.